I remember how when I was young and either my cousins came to our house or we went to their house, that is, we always had such a wonderful time. That is, we really loved and enjoyed each other and we never wanted it to end. And so when it was time for us or them to go home, it was a very depressing thing because we wanted it to go on and not end, wanted to remain with them. But I recall, the thing that we started to do when it came time to say goodbye, that is, we would get, my siblings and I would get on our bikes, and then we'd ride and chase after the car, waving and waving, going as far as we can until they're out of sight. And this was all nice and fun until one day I decided probably to take it a little too far. That is, I used to live up what is now behind like Home Depot. I don't know if you know where Fairway Drive is or Royal Pine, but I lived up there. And because it's mostly downhill to get to Route 7 and 84, that is, I chased my cousins in their car, that is, all the way down Palmer and Nabby Road onto Route 7. And then as I started to ride my bike and get on I-84, that's when my uncle pulled the car over and got out of his car and said, "What are you doing? Go home." And then my cousins would do the same thing at their house. But the point is, when you really love and care about someone, you want to remain in their presence. You don't want to leave them. You want that time spent together to go on, right? Our Lord tells us today, that is, He tells us over and over that He is the vine and we are the branches. And then He urges us throughout the gospel today to stay connected to Him. And the word that He uses to describe the connection between Him and us, and He says it actually, I think, 8 times in the gospel, that is, He says, remain, remain. Now, if you really think about that word, what that word implies is some place we are already at, but have a tendency perhaps to depart from that. Like we want to remain, we want to stay, but maybe there's a tendency to depart. In other words, spiritually speaking, it's very easy to just go say a few prayers, but it's much harder and more challenging to remain in that prayerful state all day, to pause throughout the day and say prayers all day. Or it's great to come to church on Sunday, but it's another thing to kind of lose track of God or lose track of His presence in our lives when we leave these doors and we begin our busy work week. But perhaps it's not as hard as we think it is to really truly remain in God's presence throughout our day. That is, because really all it takes is just to be more conscious of Him. Even if it's a simple pause and just look up and just glance at Him, or just thank Him for this or that, or just to say a few more prayers throughout our day instead of just in the morning or the evening. That is, this can be done, and it's really not that hard. It just takes more of a habit, more practice. And it's vital and it's important for us to remain with Him and He with us, because He tells us that 3 incredible things will happen if we're able to do that. Or things that will not happen also. That is, the first is, He says, remain in Him, because without Him you can do nothing. Not some things, nothing. So that's why His presence is so vital to us. That is, just like a young child really can't do anything on their own without the help of his or her parents. That is, they need their parents to bathe them, to clothe them, to help them with this, to guide them. That is, you and I are like a child in a spiritual way when it comes to God's presence. That is, we need His help. That is, we can't do it on our own. We can't save ourselves on our own, too. We need His grace and we need His help. And so it's important to remain with Him, because without Him, we can't do anything. 2, he tells us to remain in him because if you remain in him, you will bear much fruit. Now, what does that mean to bear much fruit? Well, as children, we all know that we tend to take on the characteristics of our parents. Like it or not, that is, we all tend to take on the characteristics of whatever or the habits or the ways that our parents have also. And so that just happens. That just happens in a very natural way because parents have the greatest influence on their children. Well, so too, the more that we stay in God's presence, the more Christ-like we become also. That is, the more time we spend in prayer or church or consciousness of Him, that is, the more we do spiritual reading or reading the scriptures at home, that is, the more time we spend with our Lord, the more we will take on His characteristics. And so we will develop them more charity, generosity, peace and joy, compassion, mercy. That as we become a more Christ-like person, the more time we spend with our Lord. And so we will bear great fruit or good fruit the more time we spend with Him. Third, and perhaps most important of all, our Lord tells us to remain in Him because with Him, I'm getting confused here. What's the third one here? Might have to read that again. Because remain in Him, because ask for anything you want and it will be done for you. I mean, think about that. Ask for anything you want and it will be done for you. I mean, wow, that's an incredible promise. That is, just like every good parent wants to give every good thing to their child, and also wants to protect them from any harm also, that is, you and I can fully trust that our Lord, our God, our Father in heaven wants to do the same for us also. That is, if we truly love Him as we know that He loves us, we have to trust that everything that takes place in our lives is for our good. Even the bad things that happen, even the trials that happen, that is, our Lord could be protecting us from something. That is, we just have to trust in His wisdom and trust in His goodness. And so we just need to remain in Him because with Him we can ask for any good thing and it will be done for us. And so it is vital, that is, it is so important to remain with our Lord as much as possible because great and miraculous things can happen the closer we are to our God. That is, to tie our hearts to the sacred heart of Jesus, to tie it tightly. That is, as St. John tells us in our second reading today, St. John tells us that God is greater than our hearts and knows everything. He's greater than our hearts and knows everything. So He knows everything. He knows our hearts. He knows everything that goes on in our hearts, in our mind, everything. He knows us so well that if we just trust Him, love Him, and tie our hearts tightly to Him, therein always lies our safety, our peace, and our joy.